I totally agree with your comment there. But there's so much history that you can attach to each of those legions, and you can build wild, bonkers, weird, upside down lists. And I think that's the thing that hooks you into Heresy. I love that.
Yeah, I think it's an unfair criticism when it's made. So I think you're right. And even if it was just Marines after Marines, there's still so much story. That's the fucking story.
Yeah.
Like, like
Yeah, well, that's true. Yeah, you're embarking on something which you know what it's all about right from the beginning. Yeah.
yeah, but that said, I was one of the weirdo players, Mechanicum, Solar Auxilia. Those
Oh,
were my so I went down that, having collected the Marines. But I just got more enraptured by this weird and wonderful world of these Chinese robot men. Like pumping out all of the vehicles around the world. I just thought it was great. Apologies, everyone, about the internet breaking, by the way.
is it
Um,
frozen?
yeah, it broke, so it should come back in a moment. So, so do you think the barrier to entry? That's what we were talking about, really.
Yes.
Do you think
Sorry, but
the barrier to entry is price, or do you think there are other barriers to entry?
I don't know. It's tricky. I think price is the big one. I do think it. I don't know. It's a tricky one. I think if you're in a certain community, if they nurture your entrance into heresy, I think it's a really really great thing. But there are some people out there that they can be a bit too critical, I think, and I think that is sometimes a barrier to entry. But I definitely think when heresy started to make an resurgence, I think that was key. But now I don't think those barriers are there too much. I think primarily it's the cost, and I think sometimes as well, because the standard of armies and the painting and the modelling, the hobby in painting in Heresy is phenomenal. And I think sometimes people get discouraged. I think, oh my God, I can't paint a space marine like that, or I can't do this. And I think that does deter some people. But there are some amazing people out there that will give you a tutorial on how they painted that black color, or that blue, or that Death Guard color, or whatever. And in the last 2 or 3, maybe 4 years, we've seen people. I know you had Henry Steele on recently, didn't you? Like Cult of Painting and Miles from Little Legend Studio. They are now showing you inside your bedroom or your spare room, wherever you do your hobby, how to achieve that particular color. And people, because they are of a certain age, they value training and they understand the value behind it and the quality that these online tutorials are giving us. The standard is slowly creeping up. And if you start the heresy with an Imperial Fist Legion, you don't know how to paint yellow, you can go to YouTube and put how to paint Imperial Fist yellow, and there'll be 20 guys will show you how they do their particular recipe. And if you can't follow them, then there's something wrong. So there's loads of opportunity for you to get started and just get your foot on the ladder. And hopefully with a great gaming club locally to you, they'll nurture you through the list building process. Because I still think that's one of the biggest questions that comes up on the internet at the moment is, I'm going to start a new Legion, what should I take? And there's so many people out there on YouTube, creative people helping you through this, start into the heresy, which is amazing. So it's definitely a lot better, and social media and YouTube and all that sort of thing has definitely played a massive part in that, which, if you look at it from a more of a wider perspective, again, it goes back to this community, isn't it? Great community spirit, people putting together and helping each other through the myriad entry levels into heresy. So it's great.
That's good. Yeah, and that's one of the things that really strikes me about the Horus Heresy, that it has an incredibly alive, active, mature, and positive community. There are elements of it, like there is in every community, which I
Sure.
think sometimes can be a tad negative. But I think that's true in all communities, so I don't think it's unique from one to other.
Totally agree.
In any shape, and if you're an example of the heresy community, I don't think you could genuinely want a better person being involved, right? Like enthusiasm, knowledge, those are key. So my next question is do Games Workshop, do you think, support the game well enough? And that's not meant to be like a gotcha question. Like if you think yeah or no, because a lot of things that I'm seeing in the chat, and also having traveled the world over the past couple of years doing coverage, in Age of Sigmar, they're like, oh, you've got a Chaos Dwarf army, I couldn't buy that in Australia, I'm not like a billionaire. And you're like, fair enough. So Forge World problems exist in other game systems as well, right?
Yeah. I think, and this is from my own limited experience, I think it all depends on the guy or the girl in the Warhammer store that's running it, because there are certain places you can go and you can bring out your amazing, lovely Heresy army, and you won't get spoken to. You'll get ignored because the salesperson in that store knows that they won't be able to say anything. Well, that's wrong because you'll buy paintbrushes, you'll buy paint, you'll buy glue, you'll buy all those extra additional things that you would normally buy if you're a hobbyist buying Warhammer or Age of Sigmar or whatever game system you play. And I think it's really unfair to ignore the Heresy. And a lot of staff in Warhammer stores, they just deny all knowledge that the Heresy existed. They don't know units. They're not fussed about. They'll go. I've been in a couple, and they've pointed at my mechanic and go, "Well, what's that?" And you even get that at Nottingham. You know, if you go to the Warhammer store there, they're like, "Oh, what's that? Oh, it's a Thalax model or a Kryos Venator." They go, "Oh, that looks pretty cool." So it's almost like they just don't acknowledge that they exist, which for me is really weird because, yes, I play Heresy, but I know lots about Adeptus Titanicus. I know lots about Age of Sigmar. I know lots about 40k, you know. So for me to go, I only play Heresy, I don't acknowledge any of the hobby system or any of the game system, for me, that's just bonkers because ultimately we're all hobbyists and we're all model builders and we're all painters and we're all gamers. So regardless whether you're playing Space Marine Legion or Adeptus Titanicus or whatever you're playing, we're all involved in the same thing, you know. So it's just weird. And I do agree with you. They don't support it as much. You know, I tried to buy some Aeronautica Imperialis stuff from a Warhammer store before lockdown happened, and they just don't carry the stock. But I probably understand why they don't carry the stock because they'll probably sell 20 boxes of 10 Primaris Marines than they will over 2 Aeronautica Imperialis planes.
But
so
that's only because they tried to sell those 20 boxes of Primaris Marines. I think I understand your point exactly, and I can give some insight, but I don't overly want to get involved in that conversation. But the relationship between Games Workshop, Citadel, and Forge World is super weird internally. Sure. A lot of it comes down to like a clash of characters as actual individuals than it does make any business acumen. The business is fucked up, and it is but run by, at some points, a bunch of idiots. There are some geniuses in there who are great, but there are some, like, two people don't like each other, so the community articles never cover the Heresy. Like,
that's a shame.
It's as simple as that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is shitty, but ultimately, the key part is that doesn't matter to the community. That's why I'm not really going to go into it because what matters to the community is that you guys or the community themselves are leading themselves. Because you need only look at the Blood Bowl community and see that they just stopped making the game, pretending the whole thing never fucking existed, and the Blood Bowl community were like, cool, we'll have 1,000-person World Cups. And then Games Workshop were like, oh, we might re-release this. And they were like, yeah, sure, but you have to follow our rulebook now. Like, and that's the power of something that, it's super cool, right? And it's something that I feel like the Heresy community also needs to like see and be like, you guys, in my opinion, like it's one of the best hobbying and gaming settings you can have. So like, just that's a great thing. So the bit that under support is super weird, and as a business, it's a terrible business decision because it makes you guys feel disenfranchised, and it makes everyone else be like, what the fuck? Like it's a weird thing, right?
I think it's really hard because we all spend so much time, effort, and money on this hobby. When Models gets released, because we're kept chomping at the bit forever and a day until stuff gets released. As soon as it gets released, if there's a little thing we don't like, we just whinge and moan about it all the time, which I think is a wrong attitude. And because the release times we're still waiting for models that are in like books 1, 2, and 3. Do you know what I mean? Which is mental. So when a guy's been waiting for that particular unit to come out, he's been waiting like 5 years, and then it comes out, and this person's built it up and I really want it to have this, and I want it to have that, and I want the rules to reflect this and that and that. Because Heresy players, they know their rules inside out, they know their fluff, and they know how they want their armies to look. So when something comes out and it's not perhaps as good as it was anticipated to be, the community explodes. But I think if maybe Forge World listened to the community a little bit more, not only would it help shape the future of the model range, which is a good thing, because I think that the Heresy community is so loyal, it would avoid all this disappointment and all this negativity. And what we've seen now is I'm going to use Eye of Horus podcast as a brilliant example. They brought out and I don't know the name of it, and I'm really sorry, guys, from the Eye of Horus, but they brought out their own little codex with Destroyer Corps in, I think they are, and lots of other weapons with Volkite. Heresy goes mad for Volkite, so you get terminated Volkites and phosphate bombs and all sorts of bits and bobs. And they did a fantastic job. You can get it online, or you can get a nice printed bound book, and they did an amazing job. And my personal opinion is it's not for the Eye of Horus to fill in the gaps that the manufacturer hasn't covered. I mean, good on them for doing it. They've done an amazing job, but they shouldn't have had to have done it. Forge World should have got their act together and gone, right, okay, it's stagnated for a little bit. I know they've had issues. I'm not a problem with that, but they need to pull their socks up a little bit. I used to work for a really big company, and they were releasing products all the time. And for them to say, oh, our lead designer's gone off on holiday for the next year or so, or whatever, we're not going to release this, and this. That is not a smart business decision. And I'm talking about Alan here, and I don't wish to talk badly about a man that's died, and it's absolutely awful, and it's such a terrible, terrible thing. But from a business perspective, that shouldn't have really stopped models and rules being written. And why wasn't there safeguards and steps in place to keep the heresy going forward? And that sounds a really awful thing to say, but
no, because it's got nothing to do with Alan, who's a lovely man. Like in any
sure.
way, what it's got everything to do, as talked about, is the business structure.
It's a business, exactly.
Like you just said, like I can go into a Games Workshop, buy a Horus Heresy. I go into Games Workshop store, buy a Horus Heresy book.
Yeah,
right?
sure.
But then I can't bring my models, which are represented in that book, and then take them into the store. It's the dumbest stuff ever. And it's just poor management. The creatives, like Alan and all the other people who are involved in those processes, are people who are just working hard to create something. And I think that's great. Management is, as you're talking about, is the issue.
Yeah.
So my question is like, how is the Horus Heresy community at the minute? Like, obviously, with that, I don't want to say stagnation, because I don't think that's the case. And I know that's the other thing as well, right? Like, by disenfranchising the Horus Heresy community, and as I'm sat here, I'm now pissed. I want you to know, like, I've emotionally become more and more pissed off, yeah? Expect a Twitter tirade very soon, yeah? We're being like, you're a bunch of cunts. Like, because you are, like, you yourself, this conversation with you, a passionate hobbyist, like, a passionate community who really motivated with a really great game, and it's being just left in the wind. And I think that's super unfair. Like, so my question to you is like, how is it doing at the community? Like, what ways are books? So I pretty much don't know what happened after the release of Custodes. So where are we at now? Have any new books come out? Have we got new units? Have they said about any forward plan? Like, what's going on, right?
I try not to get involved in this because you can go onto Facebook and you can have wish listers out the wazoo, Plastic Thunderhawk, blah, 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 and lots of other bits and bobs, and I don't tend to get drawn into it because I know Forge World are busy and I know they've got a lot on their plate and they are working harder than ever, I believe, to get book 8, or was it book 8? Book 8. Inferno was book 7, so they're working really hard to get book 8 out to us with Night Lords in. And I feel really bad for Night Lords players who've been waiting so long. But then so has other legions as well. But I think they're working hard, but they just don't give us enough of a peek behind the curtain. They've definitely got better in the last couple of years, but I still think it's not enough. And that's why I made the reference to the Eye of Horus, because the Eye of Horus podcast, because they've tried to bridge that gap, because the appetite for heresy in the community is huge. People just want more, which I totally get because it's cool and the models are amazing and all that sort of thing. But it does feel like we're a little bit left behind, which is a real shame. And I think the rules are we encounter rules errors all the time on the channel, and I think sometimes they could be cleared up quite quickly, but they are not as Forge World is not as quick at addressing these small tiny points or these wording of rules than they do with other game systems. But if you look at Adeptus Titanicus, I think they've done a really great job there. The books have come out in really quick succession, and they've errated them. So knights are a very different animal to where they were when the game was first released to where they are now. And if you look at 40k, you'll know this as well. All of those little updates, there was that Iron Hands tremor, wasn't there, when the Iron Hands came out? I don't know the particular rules, but there was something involved with like a character giving buffs to a unit.
An 80% win rate. An 80% win rate.
There you go. But they enjoyed their time in the sun for like 3 or 4 weeks, and then it got addressed, and that's what the heresy needs. Oh, was it 4? Okay, 4 months. I didn't know, but that's what the Heresy needs. It just needs to address some of these really little small bits, and I think it'll be a much tighter game. And I think that will placate people waiting for black books, because that's when we start to get rules updates and stuff. And 2 years between a book is too long, absolutely too long.
Yeah, Silver Templars is making a really good point in the chat. Actually, he says you see it even in previews, and I know the internet sucks today. I'm really, really sorry, especially when I'm really enjoying having this guest on. So, David, I'm sorry about that.
No worries.
But you can listen to it as a podcast, and I will re-upload it on YouTube for you guys. You even see it in previews, though. You get a sick trailer coming for 40k animated everything, then a cool AOS trailer, and it's like there's a single pic on a white background of a 30k character coming out in 6 months. And no, you're right. Silver Templar is right. Like, it's quite clear that the marketing department aren't doing a justified job to their game system. Like, you get more involved story for fucking Aeronautica than you do for the Heresy, and fuck knows how much money that they make for that game system. So it's just it's bang out of order, truthfully. So, but the community is alive and well. Do you see a lot of hobby still going on? Do you see a lot of people playing?
Man, the hobby is having a renaissance at the moment. I've never seen so many people getting their plastic pile painted, based, and done, and I think it is an amazing. And if almost it's probably what the community needed. Just need some time at home to paint, because painting models to such a great standard and doing everything that's involved takes time and effort. And that's one thing that if you're in the Heresy or any hobby for that matter, you haven't got a lot of time off. So I think right now is the most amazing opportunity to get stuff done, and people are taking advantage of that. And I think we're going to come out of this, and all the events that have been postponed, they're just going to be full of amazingly painted and well-populated armies with players. And I think the community in general, gaming community in general, not just Heresy, people are chomping at the bit to get over to their mate's house, get to their local club, or get to an event and play some games, because for all of the alone time we have sat in our little garage or our shed or our spare room, wherever, just hunched over a desk painting or building, we're social people, and we just want to get amongst other people, share our hobby face to face, and play a game, because that's what the hobby is all about. And I think when we come out of this, maybe June, July, who knows, there's just the uptake of events. Attendance is going to be amazing. It's going to be awesome, and people are going to flock to Warhammer World in Nottingham. I know I am, and just play some games, and that'll be really cool.
Yeah, that's super fun. Okay, so I'm gonna take some questions from the people in the chat. I got a couple for you, and I'm sure these are easy to answer. I play 8th edition 40k, but the reason I've stopped playing the Horus Heresy is because it's the old rules. It's not that I think that the new rules are better than the old rules. It's just my headspace for playing both games I'm not able to do. What do you think about updating them to the new rules? Do you think that that's not... It's okay if you don't agree. I know that that's a hot topic. A lot you can see the pro. I wonder what the con is, right?
Oh God, I played a little bit. I've not played 40k, but I've watched lots of games. I'm not a fan of the rules, but then I've not played a lot of games. So for me to go, I won't play 40k is a really bad thing to say, because I've not really played it in any depth. I just think, and I'm going to talk for myself here, not for anyone else. I'm 40. I've got a lot going on in my life, and like you, to learn another game system is incredibly hard. There's only so much room in my brain that I've got for certain stuff. So, it's one of those things. Can you teach an old dog new tricks? I guess you can, but the problem is there's no point switching to a new game system now, because they've not even finished the Heresy. We haven't got all of our models, and we haven't finished the book. We haven't got to the point where the Emperor has died. So we really need to get to that point before there's any major change happening. And if it happens, it happens. I'm not going to throw my toys out the pad and go, channel's over, I'm not playing Heresy, whatever. It will just develop. If some people, that'll be too much. If some people are indifferent, some people want it to switch over right now. If it does go to a version of 8th edition, so be it. But let's kill the Emperor off first, and then let's reevaluate the situation thereafter. And I have no doubt that Forge World have got a rule set written already for that transition. Because if they don't, then that's mental. My
money's on that then.
Who knows? The thing is, I'd like to be an optimist. I'm personally a pessimist, but I think if you're going to be in this space, you need to project a little bit of positivity. So I sincerely hope they have, because if not, as a Heresy player, I'm going to be really upset, because I don't I want the setting and I want the model range and I want the rules to continue because that's what I'm used to. But the second point I'm going to make is if we saw the new rules for, and I think it's pronounced correctly, if we look at is it the Aquator? I can't remember, the Aquator Bombard, the rules that came out for that, the blast marker, that was very 8th edition. So, and I like the way the rules were written. That was really interesting. So instead of putting the blast marker down, put your template down, look over the top, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 models. It was put the template on, had 2 firing modes. This is off the top of my head, and it hit a D6 plus number of models. Now that is amazing, and we definitely need to see elements of 8th, which there are some really fantastic elements of 8th, creep into Heresy, because they will speed the game up and they will stop ambiguous play and they will stop some of this wild rulebook errors. And I've got my rulebook in front of me, so just in case people are going to ask me some random questions about about the Heresy, I've got it here. But I think a merge between the two game systems will help bridge that gap, and hopefully we'll see more people from 8th into Heresy.
Yes, because I think that would be the big pro, right? You would get those because as an example, when we talked about that 8% win rate for Iron Hands, it really was buy Iron Hands or don't play, right, at an event. And at that point, you think, well, I'll go look at other game systems. This is the perfect time, right? And
sure.
the ability to jump across, which is, I did a weird thing. I went from Warhammer Fantasy Battle to the Horus Heresy, so that's not very linear, right? As a transition. But I think that's one of the really exciting things. And again, to reinforce, I think it's just one of the most exciting environments to play in, which is really cool. So to talk to you about the channel, what is it that you do on the channel? Like, how do you encapsulate some of those ideas on the channel? Like, what is it that you produce?
Primarily Horus Heresy Battle Reports with players from the community. That's really key. I think my USP is the boards that I build. They're quite unique. Excuse me. I would describe them as live boards. So we just use natural rock and stone combined with Games Workshop scenery and just create really weird and interesting battlefields. We also cover Adeptus Titanicus. I don't have a lot of room in my brain for another rule set, so I provide a space for Adeptus Titanicus to be played, and I do all the editing. Sorry, Boris does all the editing. But I do all the filming and stuff. And then we've got 2 guys that come and help me with that. So James Dilworth and Boris Herzog, his name is, and they help me out with Adeptus Titanicus. So they're the 2 game systems we're covering at the moment. I do want to do 2 more game systems, but I don't want to go into that too much just yet. But USP is the battlefields and the players from the community, and the channel is a vehicle for people to showcase their games, and that's primarily it. I try to bring a little bit of maturity to the channel. It's not to say that being immature is a bad thing. It's just that naturally I'm a serious person, I guess, and I'm not very good at banter, and I'm not very good at joking and laughing around. So for me to try and force that would be really disingenuous. So I am a fairly serious person, I guess. But I also think your average player of Heresy is a serious person as well, for want of a better term. So I think it appeals to a certain person, I think. But if you want to come for battlefields and well-painted models, then the Heresy's got it, and the channel's got it.
That's good. I don't think I really like that you being the truth of who you are. I talk about that a lot on the show, like just being who you actually are and then portraying that. People will I think you can tell when people are being fake, and
sure.
And I think that just it comes over odd for me. Which is why you always get like a TV presenter who is just a loud, obnoxious wanker on the TV or off the camera, right? Like,
sure.
They're just being who they are. They're not faking it, which I think is a really big positive. Is there anything else you think that we should know? Like, are there any other resources that you think are available? Like, obviously, we can come on your channel. We can find an introduction on how to play, which is great. How to get into it, which is positive. Is there any other things that you think that people should be doing to enter into the hobby? How do you feel about people who want to play the Heresy but don't want to read the books? Or would you say reading the books is pretty key?
No. For an all-encompassing hobby, absolutely read the books, because they will give you reference and they will give you ideas for lists that you perhaps not thought of. I've seen people build lists around a particular invasion force that went to X planet that took on X enemy and had a particular number of units X, Y, and Z. I'm being really generic here, but and so the books are great to theme a list around. But if you just want to collect Space Marines with a couple of vehicles, you can jump right in. You just need you need the 2 Legion books, the 2 Red books, and you can build and play Heresy right from there. If then you want to read the books and discover that you prefer Blood Angels rather than when you started off with Iron Hands or Imperial Fists or whatever, then you can go down a different path and you read the books. They'll give you some reference material. So you don't absolutely need to know why you're starting off in Heresy, but I think it does make the hobby more inclusive. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's good. I think that's a good question. What were some of the other questions that we just seen in the chat? I'm gonna ask through these. You're so succinct with your answers. It's so good. Not as wordy as I am. Would a price reduction on a Horus Heresy 4-draw minis help increase the amount of new players? You did talk about this earlier. It does feel unnecessarily expensive.
Yes, I think for the resin, resin prices are what they are, but I think the addition of plastic kits would exponentially increase people into the hobby, and that's where Heresy needs to go. It needs a core plastic range of vehicles and infantry and upgrades, and then that's where it needs to start. And then if you want to buy resin upgrades or specific Legion Terminators, that's where you go for those extra units. But it needs to start off with a core of plastic models.
Yeah, if you're going to be one of the dirty Marine players.
Well, of course.
Otherwise, just pick yourself up 80 fucking thralls and just have the best time of your life.
Oh, yes.
That's the only way to go. Who doesn't want space robots? So the future looks bright, or you think that there's like I'd so be interested to have you back on the show again in like let's say 6 months time, and like.
Pleasure.
Because like talking to you now, it's quite obvious that the community like is really alive. Like, how do you think that the other communities out there, like the 40k communities? I saw some of the guys in the chat, like Chris. He said that he's got a Death Guard army, and some of the local guys in his community play Heresy, but he hasn't actually gone over and played. Do you think it would one of the ways other community members from other communities like 40k and Age of Sigmar could support the Heresy guys? Do you think there's anything that they could do to help? I know that's off the top of your head. That's a bit much, but
it's tough. But I think it all depends on the club you go to. Now, clubs can play all sorts of different games from all sorts of game systems, and I think ultimately we're all gamers and painters and modelers or whatever else. But all that can be expected when you go to a club is that someone says, "Oh, hey, what are you doing?" Well, I'm playing 40k. Cool, and pay an interest. I think what some Heresy players do, they go, "Oh, 40k, have no interest in that. I'm not going to talk to you." But ultimately, the guy bought the same product from the same place that you bought your Heresy stuff from. He's buying the same paints, the same paintbrush. You're a hobbyist. You're a gamer. So it just needs that mutual kind of respect, I guess. But it's hard, isn't it? Because I don't play 40k and I don't play any of the games. But I started off with 40k, and someone playing 40k 8th edition today could be a future Adeptus Titanicus or Heresy or Space Marine Legion or Warcraft player, whatever, in the future. So, to discount those players right now is folly, because they could be facing off against you at a tournament in 2 years' time with a Death Guard army, for example. So we all have a common interest, and I don't think it matters what models you're painting or collecting. We're still involved, but talk to these people, find out why they like 40k. They might only have got into 40k or another game system because that's what their friends played, and maybe they might like Heresy. It's almost like proselytizing, isn't it? You're spreading the good word of Heresy sort of thing. But we all have a common interest and goal. So all other people can do at clubs or events is just nurture and encourage it. Surely.
Yeah, I knew that would be the answer, but it's still nice to hear, right? Like,
sure.
And it was, but I think that's the right setup. Someone said just a plastic box would be good from Games Workshop with 20 Marines. Amazing. And a Rhino would just be a great start.
Amazing.
Because one of the other things that we didn't talk about at all is if you're playing Heresy, it's a 3,000 point game.
Yeah.
Like it's already 50% bigger than the other games. It's a big fucking game when you play. And is that problematic or not problematic?
Yes and no. And the way to address that is the channel has filmed 2 kind of starter games. One between Alistair and I, Sons of Horus versus Mechanicum. We started at 500 points. worked our way up to 3K. I think that took 8 months to film, maybe a year, I can't remember. And then prior to that, we did an intro game with Nick Goddard. He had Imperial Fist, and Jamie Foxx, and he had Mechanicum. And again, they started at small pointed models and went into a larger pointed format. And those games, even at small points values, are fantastic. And if you look at the first 2 or 3 games from Alistair and I'm only picking that one out because I remember it more than perhaps the other ones. It was a long time ago. They still produce a really, really fantastic game and teach some very, very fundamental points about the game and about list decision and special weapons and everything else. So, yes, Heresy is paid at 3K. It is best at 3K because it allows you to bring a broader spectrum of troops and gives you a bit of variety and will fill a 6 before. But I've had some phenomenal games at 1,000 points, 1,500, and even 500 points, because every model at 500 points is so valuable. If you make a mistake, your enemy can exploit that so quickly. Therefore, your learning curve is so much harder than it is. It's so much higher than it is perhaps at 3K, because there's a little bit of give at 3K, I think. But start small, because that's all we can afford. That's all the time we've got available to us. 500 points. Go to a club. Borrow a mate's Sakaran or borrow a mate's tactical squad and build your force and look at what units you need to fulfill your fluff reasons for the army or your basic force organizational chart. So, 500 points, 3K, go for it.
And I think the thing you touched on earlier is saying how you build armies, it's so different. Like, even if you're just playing Blood Angels, for instance, there's a whole bunch of, if you guys have never built an army for the Horus Heresy, there's a whole bunch of different ways in which you can be Blood Angels. You get Blood Angels rules, and if anything, if you play either of the other 2 game systems, it's kind of like sub-faction rules, or a force organization chart can be chosen in a different way, which I always loved. I thought that was thematically clever, personally. But,
it's all about the rights of war. The rights of war can turn a list on its head. And there's limitations, but there's also advantages to it, and that gives a Space Marine player or a Marine player rather a different thing to aim for, and it will teach them a different style of play. And those. I mean, some of the rights of war are pretty terrible, but some of them are absolutely amazing, and that's where the difference for the Legions is.
All right. Last question, because I think this is a fun one. I feel like the Heresy is a little bit more like a historical reenactment sometimes, like as a war game. Do you think maybe that seems fair?
Yeah, can be.
So the real question is, what about LARPing? We know that old Duncan Rhodes loves a good LARP.
It does.
When are we all going to be dressing up as Marines and having brother on brother war? Because that sounds, honestly, with COVID, those mask helmets we could really have a great time.
Who knows? I'd love to see it.
Yeah, I'd love to see it too. Well, just before we get off, is there any final messages you'd like to tell the crowd? I want to say sorry to everyone for the internet today. I don't know what is wrong. The small child that cycles in the corner to keep the internet going, I'm going to go give him a kick.
Okay.
So, yeah, you got anything you want to say?
The only thing I'd say is, and it's probably a bit predictable what I'm going to say. It is my absolute pleasure to bring the 30K channel to people. Some people have a problem with a subscription, but I think ultimately, if there was not a subscription in place, then I would have folded years ago. It's extremely expensive, and if I look at my life today compared to how it was before I started the channel, I was definitely living a better life 3 years ago than I was today. But I'm not trying to make you feel sorry for me and subscribe, but I just want you to see that everything I do in my life at the moment is all for the production of these games, and we get occasional rule errors going on. I made an error